Frankie Avalon, the name that once made millions of American girls scream like they had completely lost it, was really a guy who spent his whole life stuck inside an invisible box. People called him the safest star in rock and roll. Good-looking, kind, squeaky clean, the kind of star that made parents feel relaxed and reporters treat him nicely. But what almost nobody got was that being safe wasn't something good. It was a quiet deal he never agreed to, one that forced Frankie to stay the perfect version of himself forever. He had real skills. From a trumpet kid wonder as a boy to a breakout star with Venus hitting #1 on the charts. And yet, the moment he reached the top, Frankie started to figure out a really hard truth. Fame doesn't care about the real person. It only cares about the image. And once you get locked into being a teen idol, every smile, every word, every step is watched. Being tired must be hidden. Feeling confused must be buried. Messing up is simply not something you are allowed to do. Frankie's sad story wasn't a big, loud public crash. It was a decades-long fight not to be forgotten. When pop music got taken over by the next era, he had to jump into beach movies, then later start over through Grease. And every comeback was like tearing himself away from the past all over again. So, how did Frankie Avalon survive when the very spotlight that once put a crown on him had also been slowly choking him? To understand how Frankie Avalon made it through so many layers of fame, you have to go back to where it all started. Not on some big stage, but inside a regular home of an Italian immigrant family in South Philadelphia, where music wasn't some fancy dream but the only way a kid could let out his real self. Frankie Avalon was born on September 18, 1940. His real name was Francis Thomas Avalon. He grew up in a working-class Italian family, the kind of home where being tough and having dignity always came before saying nice things out loud. His dad was the one who put the first tool in Frankie's hands, a trumpet. Not because he wanted his son to be famous, but because in many immigrant families back then, music was one of the few ways that could pull a kid out of the life that was already picked for him. Frankie didn't just learn. He threw himself into practice with a focus that was almost crazy intense. There was a time when that boy practiced for hours, every single day, until his breath and the sound seemed stuck together like stopping even once would make his whole life fall apart. That tough practice turned Frankie into a local kid superstar, playing in clubs, small theaters, entering local TV talent shows, winning and then going back to play again and again, like a kid who simply would not let himself quit. At 11 years old, Frankie showed up on national TV, on the Gleason Show with his trumpet, a moment that looked amazing on the outside but was really the first sign of a life pushed into the spotlight way too early. When people saw that boy, they didn't just see talent. They saw something that could be sold. And from that point on, Frankie's path no longer fully belonged to him. But the lights of the Gleason Show were only the first flash. After that came years of Frankie still playing trumpet in local clubs and theaters, where the trumpet sound floated through cigarette smoke, clinking glasses, and dreams nobody dared to say out loud. That boy grew up faster than normal, not because he acted out, but because he understood early. If he wasn't good, so good nobody could ignore him. Life would drag him back to exactly where it thought he belonged. Then came a private party, a meeting that seemed random but changed everything. At a private event connected to singer Al Martino, Frankie performed and got noticed by someone from the music business. Frankie didn't just have skills. He had what the market wanted. right then. A clean-cut face, soft features, eyes warm enough to make mothers feel safe, and cute enough to win over teenage girls before they even knew what happened. By the late 1950s, America was starting to go crazy for teen idols. Rock and roll was making adults nervous, and the music business needed a safe version. Music that was still romantic, still exciting, but didn't smell like trouble. The recipe got clearer every day. A handsome boy with neatly combed hair, a nice suit, songs about first-time feelings, sweet, easy tunes that wouldn't upset parents. Frankie Avalon fit that mold so perfectly it was almost scary, like he had been born to be packaged and sold. That was why, while Frankie was still playing trumpet for a band in Philadelphia, the second really important moment arrived. A man named Bob Marucci, a talent scout, looking for new voices, asked Frankie if he knew anyone who could sing well. Frankie pointed to someone else. But then Marucci heard Frankie's own voice. And right then, all those years of childhood practice suddenly turned into something valuable. Frankie could sing in a way that was just right, totally sellable, and easy to package. And when the deal with Chancellor Records came, Frankie didn't just enter show business. He stepped onto a factory line. And once American Bandstand had stamped Frankie as the face of American youth, the machine behind him immediately started running at a speed that allowed no saying no. There had to be records. There had to be hits. There had to be something to sell. And there had to be an image the public could tape to bedroom walls. Frankie was no longer the boy holding a trumpet, getting on stage because he loved the music. From here on, he entered a time where every song was not just music. It was a survival test. In 1957, everything blew up with the explosion of TV. Frankie showed up on Dick Clark's American Bandstand like he had been placed right in the middle of an idol factory. The camera moved across his clean smile, neatly combed hair, and eyes soft enough not to scare parents, but romantic enough to make teenage girls feel they were looking at their future boyfriend. Then Dina came as a contradiction. Frankie didn't like that song. He felt it was empty, pure teen fluff, too sweet, and too fake. But the record hit the top 10 and sold over 1 million copies. That night, Frankie learned a really hard truth. The market does not care about honesty. The market loves whatever makes money. And an artist's feelings only matter as long as they don't get in the way of sales. By 1958, everything got heavier and more suffocating. Frankie entered a stretch where his name showed up almost non-stop on the charts, in teen magazines, on variety shows and talk shows. The feeling of being picked now turned into the pressure to make the magic happen again and again and again. Endless photo shoots, questions all about teenage love, schedules so packed. He no longer knew whether he was living or just being controlled. Frankie stepped on stage with his idol smile. But behind that smile was something you'd never expect. Exhaustion. Because if you stopped, you would be replaced by another face, younger, fresher, easier to sell. Then Venus 1959 came and immediately changed everything. Not just simple teen pop anymore. The song was built up with big music full of bells and chimes that made it feel like even the sky was shaking. Frankie wasn't singing cute anymore. He sang with his full voice. Stronger, more powerful, like for the first time he had stepped out of the glass doll box and become a real singer. And the result was what every record label dreams of: #1 on Billboard for 5 weeks. Over 1 million copies sold, turning Frankie into a national superstar. In that same burst, why pushed him back to the top again, making his reputation even stronger as the idol the whole family could get behind. Daughters obsessed, mothers smiling in approval, and fathers at least not feeling worried. Frankie Avalon wasn't just famous. He became the perfect model of a teen idol, built to never cause trouble. But that very perfection started creating a new problem. The more he was loved for being safe, the harder it was for him to breathe inside a strangling coat called expectation. What made Frankie Avalon's big moment both amazing and terrifying was this: the higher he rose, the less room he had to breathe. When 1959 closed with Venus as a huge milestone, the machine wanted the next thing right away. Not to let Frankie grow as an artist, but to keep Frankie on script inside the public's dream. And so 1960 came as a year where he had to keep running no matter what. The hits kept coming out like a factory line. Just Ask Your Heart climbed to number 7. Bobby Socks to Stockings to number 8. A Boy Without a Girl to number 10. I'll Wait for You to number 15. That list wasn't just success. It was a punch card, proof of an idol forced to keep making money non-stop. In the UK, Frankie didn't blow up as big as he did in America, but he still left his mark with songs like Why, Gingerbread, Venus, and Don't Throw Away All Those Teardrops. And while his music was still hot, Frankie was already feeling what very few teen idols dared to admit. One day, the charts would change. And when that happened, a made-up face could be replaced shockingly fast. That was why 1960 was also the year Frankie pushed hard into movies and television. Not because he dreamed of being an actor, but because he had the survival smarts of someone who knew how the market worked. In Guns of the Timberland, 1960, Frankie acted and sang, bringing his catchy songs to the big screen as proof he wasn't just a voice pressed onto a record. Then an even bigger chance arrived. Wearing the Shape of a Legend, The Alamo, 1960. John Wayne himself noticed Frankie and gave him a role, a kind of seal of approval from an older generation that still carried real weight in Hollywood back then, where every newcomer needed that approving nod. But the more Frankie spread himself around, the more stretched he became. By 1961, he stood at the peak of the teen idol ideal. Flawless, polished, without a single visible crack. And for that exact reason, it was also his loneliest moment. He had to show up constantly, release music constantly, give interviews with perfectly scripted answers, smile at exactly the right second, like one missed beat would bring the whole image crashing down. Fame no longer felt like winning. It felt like a glass room. Everyone could see him, but nobody could touch the real person inside. By 1962, the numbers became undeniable. Proof of how hard Frankie was being used up. 31 singles released that entered Billboard. A massive achievement, but also the signal that a different storm was coming, because by then, Frankie started hearing new sounds from far away. Youth music was changing. Tastes were getting edgier. People wanted something more rebellious, more raw, more real. And the safe model Frankie represented was at risk of becoming old news. And that was the moment his survival instinct kicked in the hardest. Rebirth. The truth is, Frankie had been quietly opening the door for a long time. Back in 1957, even while his music career was still building, he showed up in Jamboree, 1957. A small role, but enough to bring both of his brand weapons onto the big screen. The trumpet and the voice, with Teacher's Pet serving as a quiet hint that Frankie could be packaged on any platform as long as he still sold. By 1959, the movie door opened wider with Rio Bravo, 1959. Frankie's story showed how Hollywood worked through invisible strings. According to what people say, Alan Ladd's daughter was a fan and helped push Frankie toward a supporting role. It sounded like luck, but really it was the result of a planned effort. When an idol covered the press, he became a tool the movie business could use to pull fans into theaters. From here, Frankie began his biggest change, leaving his spot as chart singer to build a new empire, the one that would save him from the music world's decline and at the same time trap him inside another image even more famous, the beach party empire. In 1963, it wasn't just a movie milestone. For Frankie Avalon, it felt like the moment you're forced to make a choice. Keep living as a packaged idol or step out of the plastic wrap and become someone with a real craft. As teen pop started losing its edge to newer waves, Frankie understood a cold hard rule better than anyone. The public doesn't hate you. They simply replace you with a face that's younger, newer, and more right for the moment. So he went looking for another stage where he could keep showing up. Drums of Africa, 1963, arrived right on time, like a test. His first leading role no longer let Frankie just look good or lean on a hit song. A movie, no matter what level it sits at, has one truth: it cannot fake. The audience will walk out if you can't hold them with real presence. Frankie brought his greatest strength to the screen, a friendliness so natural people could just trust it, a kind of charm that felt harmless and safe. It sounded like a plus, but it was also a trap. The safer you are, the easier Hollywood can turn you into a symbol instead of an artist. Frankie started to feel that even while he was still winning. When Beach Party hit, it was like a giant wave crashing through American teen culture.